Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Horton, and I'm the Director of Sustainable Business for the Outdoor Industry Association. For those not familiar with OIA, we are your trade association, and as such, we do work with you and on your behalf in service of these aspirations. If you attended yesterday's breakfast, our executive director shared this slide and explained that the aspirations that guide OIA's work are not siloed, they overlap, and they create a symbiotic ecosystem that will help ensure our industry thrives for generations to come. Our role as a trade association is to elevate the collective voice, influence, and power of the outdoor industry by advancing thriving businesses, thriving people, and a thriving planet. A strong outdoor recreation economy is one in which all people can experience, benefit from, and help protect the outdoors. We're here today to talk about our aspiration for and our work to achieve a thriving planet. This work has been ongoing for more than a decade, going back to the launch of the OIA Sustainability Working Group. In 2019, we evolved the working group's vision statement to positive impact for people and planet is the new business as usual. Instead of contributing to the environmental crisis, we believe our companies and the products we make can help solve it and create positive impact for society and the environment. To realize that goal, it's our mission to empower every outdoor company to take bold steps to achieve positive impact. And to that end, in January, we launched the Climate Action Corps, a cohort of outdoor industry companies journeying together toward a climate positive future. The Corps now counts more than 85 member companies, and we're adding members every week. A bit later, we'll talk about how you can join. The work of the Corps is guided by these principles: that we can make our products better, we can transport them smarter, we can run our operations cleaner, we can grow our businesses creatively, we can advocate for climate policy and engage our customers. So when you look at our 5 guiding principles, they essentially break down into 2 categories: greenhouse gas emissions reductions and climate advocacy. While the work of the Climate Action Corps is off and running, we are also developing a new climate policy agenda to guide our advocacy efforts to promote policy that incentivizes businesses that are driving down their own emissions, build more parks and paths to create climate resilient communities, and promote natural climate solutions as well as renewable energy. Given the extremely accelerated timeline in which humankind must reach net zero emissions in order to halt and reverse the worst impacts of climate change, there continues to be some debate about which of these 2 categories is most important, which will take us further, faster to ensure a thriving planet. So that question is one we'd like to address with today's session: emissions reductions or policy revisions. Which is the outdoor industry's best opportunity for climate impact? To help us consider and unpack the question, we've invited 2 very qualified guests. Danielle Cresswell has more than 20 years of experience working to identify environmental risks and opportunities. As the Senior Sustainability Manager at Clean Canteen, she has been a leader in the company's efforts to measure and draw down its carbon emission according to science-based targets. She's also a member of OIA's Sustainability Advisory Council, which has helped to shape the vision, tools, and resources for the Climate Action Corps. Danielle will be up first to talk about why it's so crucial for all companies, especially outdoor companies, to measure their carbon footprints and develop a meaningful plan for reduction. Following Danielle, we'll hear from Natalie Mabane, the Associate Director of U.S. Policy for 350.org. Like Danielle, Natalie also has a degree in environmental science, but where Danielle's work has focused on carbon measurement and reduction, Natalie's professional experience and focus has been on grassroots political organizing to drive clean energy legislation at the local, state, and federal levels. At 350.org, she works to influence our federal government to phase out fossil fuels and justly transition to an economy run by 100% clean and renewable energy. As you know, and we'll discuss a bit later, our approach as a trade association has always been to work collaboratively, to partner with other organizations to get more done than we could do alone. The Outdoor Business Climate Partnership, which is a partnership with National Ski Areas Association and Snow Sports Industries of America, and OIA is an example of that. While 350.org is not an organization we've traditionally partnered with, We believe our work will only be improved and accelerated if we seek to be informed by others working in this arena. It's critical that we challenge ourselves, our perceptions, and our ideas about the ideal path toward climate impact. So, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Danielle, who will be followed by Natalie.
Hello, it's great to be here with you today. Thank you so much for joining us for this very important discussion about ways that companies in the outdoor industry can take meaningful climate action. Over the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'll be making the case that measuring and reducing and offsetting our greenhouse gas emissions are valuable steps that companies of any size can take to address this climate emergency. So let's get started. I think it's good to start first by understanding where we are. Right now, across the globe, our human activities are emitting roughly 50 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. Largely, energy production and use of energy is responsible for those greenhouse gas emissions. And energy is used for things like heating and cooling, transportation, chemical and petrochemical manufacturing, oil and natural gas development. There are other sources of emissions around the world, industrial processes associated with cement making and chemical and petrochemical manufacturing. There's agriculture, which contributes its share, land use change and forestry, and even waste decomposition. But largely, our emissions are coming from energy production and energy use. And like I said, we're at a clip of about 50 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. And so when we look at all those emissions, we see that indeed scientists tell us that we can expect roughly on the order of a global temperature increase of any 4 to 5 degrees Celsius if we continue at this rate, and that's just not going to be a pleasant planet to live on if we do continue at that rate. So we really need to look at what does a livable planet look like in terms of temperature. And scientists tell us we need to work to keep our increase to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's that green line down at the bottom there. And that's where we really want to be. And so we have some work in order to get there. And in fact, we have big work and we need to do it quickly. Scientists tell us that in order to avoid the very worst of climate change impacts, we need to reduce our global emissions by almost 50% by 2030, so in a decade. And by 2050, scientists tell us that we need to be at net zero, meaning we need to be taking out more emissions from the atmosphere than we're putting back into it. So that's a lot of work in a short amount of time to deal with a big slice of our emissions. So the question arises, given that most companies in the outdoor industry are small to medium size with relatively small carbon footprints of their own in their scopes 1 and 2, especially relative to what we see there in global sources, and given that the average company has a modest leverage for making change in their supply chain emissions, why would an individual company spend the effort and resources to work on reducing their emissions? I've got some thoughts. Well, let's start with the business case, shall we? There are approximately 50 million people in the United States who regularly recreate outdoors, and across the world, it's more like 500 million people. The outdoor economy in the U.S. is valued at $887 billion and supports over 7.5 million jobs. Climate impacts are now, and they will continue to jeopardize our outdoor recreation opportunities as we see a declining health in our environment. This is a result of increased fire, increased drought, warmer winters, the spread of disease across plant and animal communities. All of these things make for a less habitable environment, which is going to obviously result in a declining outdoor economy. Given the relatively short timeline to interrupt the worst of climate change outcomes, taking action to reduce our emissions, the emissions that we directly control, that we create, and offsetting when necessary, is clearly called for, because this is an all-hands-on-deck type of threat to our livelihoods, and as outdoorists ourselves, it's a threat to our way of life. Our customers, both now and in the future, expect us to take responsibility for our environmental footprint, including our greenhouse gas emissions. I pulled up the Millennial Pulse report from the Shelton Group, and I thought I'd share some of the figures there. 76% of millennials are concerned about how climate change will impact their lives, and 82% say they're concerned about the impact it will have on their children's quality of life. Many of them look to companies to solve problems they feel are beyond their ability to address. And 70% of them said a company's environmental practices influenced their purchase decisions, and that company environmental actions are cited as the top reason millennials trust a brand when it comes to sustainability. At some point, advocacy or lobbying is a valuable tool to support climate action. Legislators tend to lean in, we know, when business leaders make requests based on their direct experience. And legislators are especially appreciative of guidance on how they, through their role as policymakers and budget creators, can support jobs and economic prosperity. So by taking the time to understand how climate change is adversely impacting our businesses and showing how we are doing our part to measure, reduce, and even offset our emissions, it makes a more compelling case for climate and energy-related investments from our government. And lastly, I'd like to suggest that yes, as individual companies, our reductions may be small. But I want to recall Paul Hawkins' visit to us a couple of years back at the industry breakfast. Paul shared many compelling thoughts with us, but the one of them that stuck with me was this idea that there's no such thing as a small solution. In the late 1990s, in my early professional career, I was a stream and salmon restorationist. It seems like a long time ago. And at the time, I was thinking a lot about the interactions between land use practices like timber harvest and grazing and road building, those types of things, and how those activities interacted with hill slope processes and weather events and ultimately influenced the health of our Pacific salmon in our local streams. At the time, it was pretty common to evaluate these types of human activities in the watershed according to their individual effect. How much effect did that timber harvest have on the stream health? Or how much individual effect did that one road have on the health of the stream? Then I learned about this idea called cumulative effects from this really fun and quirky scientist. Her name is Dr. Leslie Reed, and she was working out of the Redwood Sciences Laboratory in Arcata, California. And she advocated that watershed activities need to be evaluated, not solely for their adverse effects to the immediate surroundings and in the near term in terms of when, but also they need to be looked at how they contributed over time and to the adverse effects downstream and in combination with other activities in the watershed. It was clear to her that looking at each activity in isolation, one might think the effect was minimal, but taken cumulatively, the true effect was much greater. So when I take this idea and apply it to the topic of emissions reductions, what I'm suggesting is that our individual contributions to the drawdown of greenhouse gas emissions really gain significance when taken cumulatively across our industry and indeed across the consumer product sector. Just one company by itself reducing, yes, it could go unnoticed, but if we pool our efforts together cumulatively, they can really add up to a meaningful and measurable reduction. So what can outdoor companies do? Start measuring, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Identify the data where you can and estimate where you can't. Measure your energy use. Identify what your energy sources are, both in your facilities and in your supply chain, and quantify those resulting emissions. This step not only allows a business to quantify the emissions associated with their operations, but it also reveals key opportunities for cost savings and innovation. Next, create a reduction plan and apply it with urgency. A good plan includes a mixture of projects that range in level of effort in order to allow success to be enjoyed while at the same time pressing for the challenging but more significant reductions. And remember, a good place to look for reduction actions are those places where there's a reduction opportunity and there's cost savings. Energy savings often correlates with these things, with saving money and reducing emissions. And then third, join the OIA Climate Action Corps, a wonderful community of businesses learning together with expertise and resources being made available in order to help companies get going on this journey and shorten the journey by saving time and money, and also very quickly ramping up their efforts that will help to save our outdoor industry. I wish that there was a Climate Action Corps when Clean first started this journey around climate strategy and management of our emissions. It's been easily 5 years and lots of time trying to figure out how to do this on our own. And now there's the Climate Action Corps that can help speed up this process, help to avoid or leapfrog these early challenges and missteps. It's a valuable place to engage for companies at any stage in their climate journey. And our cumulative effect in drawing down our greenhouse gas emissions becomes only greater with every new company that joins. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for joining this conversation. And I'm going to hand this off to my friend Natalie from 350.org. And she's going to talk to us about how advocacy can be a powerful action to take, again, to address this climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I'm Natalie Mebane. I'm the United States Policy Director for the international climate organization 350.org. And I'm really happy to be here with you all today to discuss how the outdoor industry can really fight for climate action. So I'm going to go through today a few of the things that I work on, but also more importantly, how the outdoor industry can work with everyone in this field to fight for climate action and to really preserve the places that we all love. So the first thing to really talk about is what you all feel your role is in this movement. And we're going to discuss different ways that everyone can be involved. Now, the first step when I think about climate action is what exactly are we fighting for? What is it that we're all working towards in the end? So on the left here, we have a picture. It's actually my background that I'm in right now, is the Muir Woods. And this is one of my favorite destinations. It's one of the favorite places I've gone to hike out in California in Marin County. Very accessible from San Francisco, and just overall a serene and peaceful place. And over here on the right, we have Joshua Tree National Park. I also took this picture there as well as the one on the left, which I was in Joshua Tree, November 2018. And one thing to remember about climate change is that, you know, national parks have borders, but climate change does not, and it affects everywhere in the world. I remember reading a study from some years back. I used to work in a national park briefly as an intern, Devil's Postpal National Monument, back in 2007. And I was reading a report that said that at some point in the near future, it's expected that Joshua Tree National Park won't even have Joshua trees in it because of climate change. And so as we can continue to see so many of these amazing places, these places that are really their own namesake, may not even have the resource that people came to see. Now, what is at stake? As you know, the world has been changing from climate change, and it's obviously made even worse as time goes on, right? Just human caused climate change. And as you can see from just the picture on the left is Glacier National Park, how it used to be and how it is now. What's the point of visiting Glacier National Park if there are no glaciers? And scientists are saying that fairly soon, that is exactly what they expect. And all, as you can see, across the world, across the country, it's the same thing, whether it's California wildfires or glaciers melting, climate change is affecting every single natural space and human occupied space there is. And as you can imagine, these are the places that people who purchase outdoor equipment are going to. These are the places that they are using their gear at. And if they can't access these spaces because it's become either too dangerous because of climate change or just not worth it because there's no more glaciers to even see, that obviously affects the industry as well. Now, the real question is, why should the outdoor industry lead on climate policy? What is it that the outdoor industry should do, and what stake do they have? Now, as you can see here, we have a picture of the Capitol on the far right, and the Capitol is the great place to start. Lobbying is needed. It is important, but of course it has to be strategic and it has to really work towards your goals of what you want to accomplish. So two committees that I work in very often is the House Natural Resources Committee, chaired by Raul Grijalva of Arizona, and the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, chaired by Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Both of these committees are very important when it comes to creating legislation and any type of regulation of especially our public lands, which of course includes everything from national parks to also National Forest Service. And it also regulates whether it's, extractive industries that take place on those lands, as well as anything from permitting, leases, and just overall access to these places. One thing to remember, of course, is that right now the House is led by Democrats. And so there has been somewhat of a shift in focus of more of a conservation mindset to some degree. But either way, it doesn't really matter which party occupies each committee, because without being pushed strongly to take action, you cannot expect our elected officials to really be responsive. And so we have to really do our best in terms of advocating, lobbying, and overall making sure that our elected officials are held accountable and that they're hearing from consumers as well as from other stakeholders, such as the outdoor industry, when they're deciding what they're going to do with our public lands. So definitely important to actively lobby and to be overly engaged in every process you can related to the government. Now, another question is, who is purchasing outdoor gear? Right here, we have two folks who I know quite well. These are my former colleagues at Sierra Club. One on the left is Chris Hill. She's a great, avid backpacker and uses anytime she can get away to be in Alaska to do fly fishing. And over here we have a friend of mine, Robert Vessels, who is actually part of the program in Sierra Club Military Outdoors, where he actually leads outings for veterans as a way of helping to heal some of the emotional scars that can come from being a veteran. And so they can, between the two of them, they probably own as much outdoor gear as I've ever seen. So, and there's of course that's a great little dog, Gertie. This is dog Gertie. So the people that are out here doing these activities, purchasing outdoor gear, they already care about the environment. Now, some obviously work in the field like the two here, but many aren't able to work as their full-time job fighting against climate change. But what they do have, they have one, a lot of times brand loyalty to whatever gear that they do have, because it has those memories with them that they're making using these products. And another thing that they have too is a willingness to push and fight to preserve the places that they love. Now, this can be very powerful. Just the same way that the outdoor industry is worth hundreds of billions of dollars, that's powered by people power as well as purchasing power. And one way that I'd recommend the outdoor industry really working to combat climate change is to engage and mobilize their base of customers and helping push their customers to work with them to say, you know what, we're not just representing our customers in terms of this is the gear that they purchase, but we also believe that they want to fight for those same lands that keep our industry open. And so actually looking at your customers as more of a membership base rather than just regular consumers. In the same way that nonprofits, the power of nonprofits comes from the people who choose to organize in nonprofits. So consumers and advocating for the environment. These pictures are from the September 20th climate strikes in Washington, D.C. That was the day, as you all probably remember, millions around the world struck for climate. They took, a day on that Friday, and over 7 million people, mostly young people, went into the streets to strike for the climate. I was a part of the DC strike. And so this is a mobilization that is taking place and has continued to take place, which shows you that young people, who are also consumers too, care about the earth. And they want to really buy from customers, from companies that are also advocating for the earth. So look at these consumers as your base of members, just like 350.org looks at our members as our power source. We're not as powerful as, say, in wealth, right? As a company would have a lot of wealth, but we are powerful in terms of our people power. And that is what keeps us being able to go into members of Congress's offices to push for policies that matter to us. Now, in terms of how the outdoor industry should engage in politics, I'm going to give you an example of an industry that engages in politics very, very well. Unfortunately, a little too well. The American Petroleum Institute. Now, they are a compilation of companies, of oil and gas companies, all working together politically for the same agenda. Now, of course, their agenda, unfortunately, is not one that we would support. It's an extractive industry on our lands, but they are very effective. They get any member meeting they want, you can imagine. They often, give a lot of donations to different elected officials, which keeps them obviously doing their will of API. And overall, they are very organized. Now, their industry, if you think about it comparatively, is a boom or bust industry. And right now it's in a bust. As you know, oil prices are extremely low because of lack of demand right now. The outdoor industry is much more stable, and it's still worth hundreds of billions of dollars, employs millions of people, millions of more people with the outdoor industry and the economy. And it overall serves a much better purpose because it's sustainable. You can continue to visit these parks, you can continue to see them, you can continue to regulate the lands properly if it's well managed. The only thing that is really a threat to the outdoor industry is the degraded environment, is climate change, is the fact that if the resources aren't there, then there is no industry to really sell from. So overall, what I would mostly recommend is that the Climate Action Corps, which I'm so happy exists and so happy so many of these great companies are a part of, that they join together and lobby and push for legislation in the same manner that API does, the same way that they push for their rules that will help them and push for laws that will assist their industry. I would love to see the Climate Action Corps do the exact same thing and fight for climate legislation and fight for conservation bills and fight against extractive industries on our public lands. And that would go a very long way. Even if it's a matter of simply giving a staffer as a liaison to the Climate Action Corps and essentially forming it as a coalition can do a lot. One of the parts of my work that makes it the most effective is that I consistently work in coalitions with as many environmental organizations as possible nationwide. And for example, after the stimulus bill, which passed in March of this year, we were anticipating another one coming out soon, and it did in May. But before it came out, we wanted to really go on the record as the environmental community for what exactly we are pushing for the next stimulus bill. What are our shared principles? So we created a sign-on letter, and when we were finished, we had over 330 different organizations signed on. So when we turned that in to members of Congress, it wasn't just a, hey, here's a few groups that agree. It was, here is the voice from the environmental community telling you the type of just recovery that we want. And that speaking in one voice is what we really need from this industry. We need everyone to say, we might all be essentially competing brands, but none of us are competing when it comes to keeping the lands as clean as possible, undamaged as possible, so that we can even have an industry to sell from. So that would be my main recommendation, is working more as a coalition that is able to speak with one voice on the Hill with elected officials so that you're even being more effective. And one thing to use, this is the last thing I'll show everyone, is a really great tool that I utilize called Quorum. Quorum is a tool that you can use to contact offices from members of Congress, as well as state elected officials as well. So there's a federal subscription and there's also a state subscription. You can have both. And you can email every single staffer on the Hill within seconds. You can even look up what staffers, in terms of the jobs that they do, the issues that they cover, everything from committees and bills. You can track legislation, search any bill you want that has ever been introduced by searching a keyword. And you can do the same thing on the state level as well. So this would be one of the tools that I would recommend utilizing if you are going to expand your lobbying work. And if you guys are all going to work together within your climate org, sort of your coalition, to influence members of Congress. So those are just a few of the tips I would give. And of course, I'd be happy for any other questions. Thank you all so much for having me here today.
Okay, we'll just give everybody a minute to gather here. Okay, thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Danielle. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, super. So I'm sure that you all have questions for our speakers, and we're going to be taking them in just a moment. But first, before we do that, reflecting back on the question we posed at the beginning of this session, which is the outdoor industry's best opportunity for climate impact? Is it more effective to focus on reducing the greenhouse gas emissions associated with your business, or should you focus more on climate advocacy? We hope it's clear from these presentations that we need both to achieve the targets that Danielle spoke about, that science says are necessary to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. We believe every business needs to take responsibility for its carbon footprint, excuse me. But that alone, even if you reduced all the emissions you could, that alone won't get us where we need to be. We also need policy that helps business drive reductions, you know, for example, by helping, doing things by making renewable energy more affordable. And even still, if every industry reduced all they could, that still won't get us there. We also need policy that supports removing carbon from the atmosphere in addition to reduction. So thankfully for our industry, nature is our most readily available, cost-effective way to sequester carbon. So conservation plays an important role, as does the creation of more urban parks, for example. Of course, many of you already know and participate in OIA's advocacy work on issues related to public lands, conservation, outdoor recreation. But as I mentioned in the opening comments, we are also developing a climate policy agenda in collaboration with our members and partners so that we can bring more advocacy opportunities like the ones Natalie spoke about to our members, and also better amplify the work of our partners like POW, TRCP, Outdoor Alliance, Conservation Alliance, just to name a few. There are others. The one last thing I'll say before we, before I check in with Natalie and Danielle is that we know many of you are small to mid-sized companies. Most OIA members are small to mid-size. You don't have the resources to purchase or manage tools, great tools like Quorum, like Natalie shared, excuse me. You probably don't have headcount dedicated to advocacy. That's where OIA will help serve our members to advance meaningful climate policy in 2021 and beyond. The focus of our policy agenda, which is still forming, still preliminary, will be bringing the unique and the unified voice of the outdoor business community to elected officials and agencies. So stay tuned for more on that. But there are strong planks around renewable energy, incentivizing the business practices that help you draw down carbon, natural climate solutions, and things like more parks and more paths to create climate resilient communities. So I'm gonna start to peruse the questions pane here, but before I do that, Danielle and Natalie, any reflections on each other's remarks that you'd like to share before we go to questions?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I have just a couple things and sort of dovetailing a little bit on what you were saying there, Amy. It's so encouraging from Natalie's comments to really encourage us as outdoor companies to pool our resources, to come together, to advocate together for a strong voice on an outdoor specific climate policy. And it's just really encouraging, as Amy was saying, like we are building the tools that we need so that we can do that. We're building a climate policy platform so that we have our thoughts organized and focused on what we as an outdoor industry need. And that will be a tool to communicate with policymakers, and that will be leveraged to engage all of us as outdoor industry members to help extend our voice. So as I hear Natalie talking about like, this is what you need to do, it gives me excitement because, yep, we are working on that. So cross that one off the list. And then secondly, if you saw in Natalie's presentation as well as mine, we're referencing the fact that there's a lot of people out there, a lot of current and future customers who expect us to take action, whether it's advocacy or it's reduction, it's actually both. They expect us to act like our house is on fire, and it's not acceptable. I just try to imagine a conversation where my house is on fire and my kids come to me and say, well, what are you doing about it? And I say, well, I'm waiting for somebody else to come and take care of it. And like, that wouldn't really happen. I know if my house is on fire, I'd be getting the hose, I'd be knocking down the brush, I'd be doing anything that I could to make sure that what was important to me was safe. And I think that's the type of approach, listening to Natalie, listening to what I shared, that's what our people expect of us. And whether it's the people who are in our family or it's our customers or future customers looking down the line, like I want to be able to say, and I think that you do too, our house is on fire, and every day I was thinking about what I could do about it and taking action on that.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Danielle. And I would say as well, I did notice that both our presentations happened to mention the customers, and really seeing that that is a resource, that your customers are, typically very brand loyal and want to take action. Also, in terms of the question earlier about, reducing our own emissions versus advocacy, I think you do have to start at home. I think it's great to say, you know what, let me look at my supply chain. What can I do to reduce my own emissions? It's much easier to speak with that authority when you feel like you've at least taken the first steps to see what you can reduce and how you can make your own business model more sustainable. And then once you've kind of done that, and obviously that's a continuous process, it's not like a time that you're essentially finished. You don't just say, okay, I'm great now, I'm ready, we're good. You have to keep striving to be even better. But in the meantime, you don't have to wait till you're essentially perfect to start actually changing laws, because the laws are going to be passed whether you're in the room or not. And so the only difference is that you're inserting yourself so that you actually have a voice to determine how they end up. Those committee hearings are happening, as we speak. And are you going to, oppose a bill that comes up that is going to be very harmful to your industry, or are you going to have the opportunity to uplift something that could really be helpful? And I think that's the point of engaging with our base of supporters, whether it's a nonprofit or whether it's a company, to say, if we all are striving for the same thing, to preserve these natural spaces, because that is the source of income for these companies to have outdoor gear. I didn't wear, when I was in the background here at the Muir Woods, I was not wearing high heels and a dress. I had on Merrell boots and I forgot the name of my pants, but I know the pants, some zip off quick dry, and a Patagonia quick dry shirt. And so you're going to use it if these spaces exist.
Okay, awesome. So I am perusing the question pane, and I see some questions coming through, and I'm going to combine some, and some I'm going to ask directly. But let's start. I want to kick off the Q&A with a question on climate justice. So one important thing that we are learning, and that has especially been brought to light recently, is that climate change is not simply an environmental issue. It's a social justice issue. It's a racial issue. It's an economic issue. So Natalie, I'm hoping you can talk a bit about what climate justice means. I know it's a big part of how 350.org does your work. It's bedrock, part of your mission. And then, if you have any comments on how the outdoor industry could better integrate social justice into our climate action and advocacy work.
Definitely. Yes. Climate justice is social justice. It's all the same thing. Realistically, when we talk about climate change, what we're really fighting for is the survival of humanity, is the survival of human civilization. And it's always been that. I mean, yes, if we survive and we're able to thrive on this earth, the other animals will be fine too, right? We all, we see the depressing pictures of starving polar bears because there's no sea ice anymore. We see all that, and that's real, and we shouldn't discount that. But in the end, that's just the first animal to go kind of thing. It's not the last. And I think that the purpose of fighting for environmental justice and climate justice is that we are fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for our own homes. And, with pollution, when it comes to, and you think about the root cause of climate change, obviously, is the burning of fossil fuels. That's where it's, all came from, carbon emissions. Fossil fuels causes pollution regardless. Even if carbon dioxide wasn't the issue in terms of climate change, you're still causing benzene and mercury and every other hazardous pollutant that you can imagine that causes cancer and asthma and everything else, and poisons water. And so the root cause of the pollution is that it's killing people. That is what it's doing. Pollution kills people. And so we're continuously producing something that we know 100% kills people. And that on top of that has a side effect that even if it's not produced in an area that you live in, that you aren't directly exposed, you're still going to face the consequences, because now we also, after all these, decades and decades of burning fossil fuels, now have climate change. And so it actually puts us all in the same boat, where we're all affected, but we're not all affected equally. And so a lot of times, of course, as you all know, money, power can buy you distance. It can buy you delayed impacts. It can buy you like, oh, the seas are rising, we'll move to higher ground. But you have to have that ability to move to higher grounds. And even when you see things like climate disasters, which, yes, natural disasters have been a thing forever, but obviously they've gotten significantly worse to the point where it's not even true to call them natural anymore. We see the people that are left behind when these disasters hit, when these fires hit, people that can't necessarily escape, or when it's a hurricane or a flood and they don't have a car to fill up. And everybody remembers Hurricane Katrina, which this August will be 15 years, right? That was 2005, 15 years. So the people that were stuck were the ones who didn't have the money to leave. We assume it's a luxury to pack up your SUV with everything that you belong, that you care about, your family albums, and get away. The people that were stuck were ones who were like, I don't have a car. Where do I go? Oh, well, you stay there and you die. That's what happens. And that's just the truth of the matter. So we can't say we're fighting climate change if we don't acknowledge the fact that climate change hits us all, but it does not hit us all equally. And climate justice is essentially coming at the work in a way of understanding that there have always been sacrifice zones in this world where we say, we'll do this over here, and we're okay if it kills the people that live there. And we'll ensure through social systems that will only place people there that we already don't care about in society anyway. And so it becomes the entire cycle that you cannot uphold and create and produce and continue this fossil fuel economy without continuing all of the racism, all of the oppression, and all of the death that follows it.
Thank you, Natalie. And, any thoughts on, what we as an industry might do, how we might integrate this better? For us to authentically stand behind this notion of an equitable outdoor access for all, we need to address this notion that climate change has disproportionate impacts on certain communities, including communities of color, that might prevent them from even getting outside. So you talked about many intersections, but if local air quality is bad as a result of pollution associated with a coal-fired power plant, for example, that in turn impacts respiratory health, which in turn inhibits outdoor activity. I mean, you need to have both healthy outdoor spaces and healthy people in order to get more people outside. So, how might we be thinking about this in our work, in our advocacy, and in our action?
That's actually a good point. That's something I didn't even think about. Going hiking or something like that, it's something, you do for fun. You can't do that if you're not healthy. You can't actually, and I have asthma. I grew up with asthma my whole life, but it's, I have medicines under control. I can still do outdoor activities, but you're right. If you're in an area where you're exposed to so much pollution, your respiratory, your illnesses and things like that, then yeah, it's going to be even harder to even experience these places. I think the role for the outdoor industry in that is that fight for the world. And when you do fight for the world, you're fighting for everyone. You don't have to even, I understand that it's obviously it's a for-profit company, right? That you have to make a profit. You have to focus on the bottom line. It's not a nonprofit. That makes sense. But in the end, if you're fighting for a world that is safer, that is healthier, that is not harming people, then your industry prospers too. So you might still have the same profit motive as always, which is fine, but you're also saying, you know what, I understand that a healthy world makes a healthy industry, and in terms of outdoor industry, and having access to spaces and making sure that everyone who wants to access spaces, which is everyone wants to live and go to a beautiful place. Nobody ever looks at something beautiful and is like, no, I'm okay. Everybody loves the sunset. Everybody loves the woods. Everybody has, even if they're not outdoorsy, they still know the value and the feeling. And so if the outdoor industry makes a goal of, I want to get as many people outside to experience these places as possible, because it has a tangible benefit to their life to have that space, then that can be the goal ultimately. And in the end, you also will have a stronger business because, like I said, people don't hike in heels.
All right. Right. Okay. Thank you. I want to, while you have the floor, Natalie, there's a question for you here from Libby Summer, Bolt Threads, who actually connected us to you. So her question is, and I might comment on this, but I want to give you the floor first, Natalie. Do you believe the Outdoor Industry Association should be speaking up on the Hill on behalf of the industry, or that these brands should be? Is there an existing coalition that you think brands or the OIA should join that might be particularly powerful for us?
Well, I know from what I know of this group, you all already coordinated as part of the Climate Action Corps. So you guys already have sort of your coalition. So I think the structure luckily is there, which is great. I think the main thing is just expanding it to have a very strong mission of, this is what we're here for. This is why we're here. And here are the requirements to join. This is what we're all fighting for, what we're pushing for, so that you can speak as, of course, as individual companies, but I think it's even stronger when you do combine. So for the environmental community, each environmental org has their own setup of what they prioritize and work on. 350 has its priorities, Sierra Club has its priorities, and so on. But when we do combine our powers and we work together, and we do, in fact, we're actually in the moment right now, this week and next week, running a joint volunteer lobby weeks on the stimulus package. We know that the Senate package is coming out soon, possibly this week, but even before that, we knew that it would be coming out soon. And so a group of us, or our orgs, coordinated to reach out to our members that all live across the country, coordinate with them, say, here are some of the targets that we have for this, legislation that's going to be moving. We'd love for you all to join in, and then schedule meetings together for the purpose of lobbying together, so that it's all these orgs and their volunteers working together. And so we're doing that as we speak. And we do this all the time. I mean, it's sort of like, why would you not want to work with your friends? And so I think for us, it's more of, yes, you should definitely be speaking up on the Hill as individual companies, if that's something you have the resources to do, have a dedicated staffer, as well as participating in the Climate Action Corps.
Thank you, Natalie. And I'll just follow by saying we do, work on behalf of our members, but we also, and once we have a climate policy agenda finalized, we'll be able to offer more opportunities for brands and retailers and other members of OIA to participate in advocacy directly. So while we will do things like we do a fly-in every year, may become a virtual event, and so there is work that we already do, because we already have we already do advocacy work on behalf of and in partnership with our members, and many friends, as you said, many of you are listening and participating on the call today, like POW and the Outdoor Alliance, some I mentioned earlier. So we do have coalition is forming, and I think we all have slightly different agendas when it comes to climate, but there are many overlapping themes. And so I think what members of OIA and of the Climate Action Corps in particular can expect are more of those opportunities to connect directly with legislators on this topic with the help and the organization of OIA. Whether it's direct visits or virtual visits or action alerts or ways to engage your customers on the topic. So I want to shift gears a little bit, looking at the questions that are coming through here. And Danielle, there's a lot of questions, at least 2 or 3, just kind of asking for the basics. And I can speak a little bit on the Climate Action Corps and what we provide, what that gives members in a moment. But how to get started, basic recommendations on ways to start to measure your carbon footprint and to develop an action plan to reduce. I'll say that's a lot of what the Climate Action Corps does, and I can speak to that. But Danielle, I want to give you a chance to respond to that if you have anything.
I know, I'm so like, go to the Climate Action Corps, they got you covered. Yeah, you need to sort of do a little bit of investment and learning in what are the normal energy sources, in and around my business. Like, how do we use energy? It's kind of like a little checklist, if you will. Oh, we use energy to power our computers. We use energy to heat and cool our facility. We use energy to run the lights. And then, okay, so we need to measure that energy and identify what the sources of that energy are. And so pull out your Excel, start to put that information together. And there's good guidance available. Again, like the Climate Action Corps has a really fantastic guidance on this is what you look for. These are the activity data you want to collect. And this is how you then calculate your emissions, either directly or using a tool to calculate your emissions based on how much energy you're using and what kind of energy it is. Those are, that is, and I know I'm using some techie language, but activity data is just simply reflecting how much energy you're using and in what kind of units you're using. But just identifying your energy sources and how much energy you're using and putting that in one place, documenting it. A spreadsheet is a great place to just start capturing that information, and then looking at where does that data, like how will we regularly determine how much we're using? Our utility bill is a great source of information for how much you're using. And then there's great, EPA put out a simplified, easily free tool online to help you take that data and put it into the tool, and it'll spit back out what those emissions are. They're simple tools, and just really getting a handle on how do we as an organization use energy, power our vehicles, what have you. You need to start to put that all in one place and then figure out where do we record how much we use, and then use the tools that are available to calculate those emissions. And you start doing that, and you start looking at, okay, just looking at your own organization, if this is how much energy we use, what are the things that we can do to start to reduce those emissions? And you start to put those ideas down. You consult with your facilities manager and your office manager, your sales team, whoever is involved in using that energy. You start to brainstorm, okay, what are things that we can do to reduce that energy use and the emissions are associated with it. And out of that, you start to put together your reduction plan. That's just thinking, that's not thinking about supply chain. Supply chain becomes sort of that, sort of on steroids. There's so much more going on there. But there are good guidances out there that are available. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it, but the Climate Action Corps has done a really good job of capturing that guidance, creating a guidebook, creating trainings that'll tell you exactly how to go about doing this. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. That's a good plug and good segue. I'll talk a little bit more about how to find more information about the Climate Action Corps right at the very end here, but I will say that for a long time, the methods for calculating your carbon footprint, and still today, they're either locked behind the four walls of a consulting firm where you might have to pay a lot of money to do the measurement, or there's the greenhouse gas protocol, which is sort of the key tool, sort of the accounting guidance, if you will, for doing the measurement, is thousands and thousands of pages. So we know our members, by and large, are small They don't have even potentially a sustainability person on staff. You do not have time to wade through that. You do not have the money to hire a consultant necessarily, although many consultants can be helpful for an affordable price. But to get the work done, you're going to have to dig in and do it yourself. And that's why we created the Climate Action Corps in part, to kind of simplify and demystify the guidance and give you access to a few key tools that can help you get this done, like the EPA tool that Danielle mentioned. Climate Neutral also has a tool. So there's some low or no cost ways to get this done with a little bit of boots on the ground, a little bit of elbow grease. And so I'll come back to the Climate Action Corps, how to get more information, what it is. But I want to just look back at the question, see if we have time for one more. Ashley, I'm going to share your question. Our company has a nonprofit that is working on public land and climate. We are working on bills that will reform the way we lease public land for oil and gas development and methane management. These bills are wonky and not easy to explain to the public, unlike the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Do the panelists have advice for helping outdoor enthusiasts get involved in the wonky aspect of legislation? Natalie.
Sure, I like that question a lot. Sorry. I do think, yes. So in terms of working with the general public, you do not just sit there and read a bill to them. That's not going to work. I mean, there are some people who really like reading bills. I particularly like it. I think it's fun. But the most people are not going to sit there and want to read it. It's more so explaining what are the effects of this bill. So if we're talking about public lands, and when I was a lobbyist at Sierra Club, I was on the public lands team. So I did dirty fuels, which was oil, gas pipelines, and I was on the public lands team. So I also focused on public lands. And I think the way to explain it is to people is telling them, you can't share the same space on public lands in terms of your camping and your other things with extraction. It kind of ruins the trip, right? If you're going to Bears Airs and you're there to look at the beautiful night sky and there's flares going on in the background, it kind of ruins it for you, right? It's like you left the city to get away from the lights, and now you're dealing with the light pollution and the other pollution that comes with it. So I think the way to describe it to your base of members, I mean, not members, I'm calling them members because they can be, right? Your consumers, is showing them that you are fighting to preserve the night sky. Show them a picture of Bears Airs in the night sky. I used to have it as a background on my computer, where people see this picture on my background. They're like, what is that? It's so many dots. They don't even know what they're looking at. I say, oh, this is the night skies from Bears Airs. And so show them that you're actually stopping things that are taking their experience from them. That's how you explain it. People speak in the language of what affects them the most and what they want to preserve and what they love. And so don't explain, this is going to cut this and this and put a moratorium on leasing for this many years. Explain to them why leasing near this park will destroy their purpose of going to that park. And trust me, they'll be 100% with you.
Okay, thank you. We're just at time here, and before we get kicked off, I'm not sure if that will happen. I'm just going to share my screen here and give you guys a couple links to more information about the Climate Action Corps. First and foremost, I just want to thank, this is a build, let me build that out. I just want to thank you both, Danielle and Natalie, and all of the folks who joined today. And we'll just maybe wrap up with a little more information on the Climate Action Corps and what you can expect by joining. We talked a lot about guidance already. The guidebook is our simplified, outdoor relevant, more accessible tool for getting measurement done, but also setting targets and starting to think about reduction opportunities. There are trainings that support that, maybe someday again in person, but for now they are all virtual. We're also connecting members of the Climate Action Corps with the tools to conduct measurement, to help you set targets, and to help you reduce, and then probably most importantly, community. This is a community of peers, as Danielle said, that she wished she had more of when she was just starting out. at Clean Canteen. You know, instead of one consultant, you get 100 peers who are doing this now or who have already done it. And then you'll also get access to reduction projects where, you know, to get to the reductions that are needed in the supply chain, which is 90% from pretty much, you know, most companies in the outdoor industry who make gear, it's going to be 90% of your greenhouse gas emissions. You're going to need to collaborate with other brands to really make a difference there. We're organizing some projects to help get that done. So last but not least, reach out to us, climateaction@outdoorindustry.org. You can also go to outdoorindustry.org/climateaction to sign up. That will get you access to the guidebook, access to the community, and to some of the tools to start to measure, set targets, and reduce your footprint. Thank you all for joining us today. Any final words or anything to share, Danielle or Natalie? Okay.
I would say just keep going, and don't let perfection get in the way of moving forward. Just gather your group and hit the hill.
All right. Thank you all. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.